So we are on the last week 3 of a series, Work by Design, Not by Default. Work is important. It's a gift given to us by God. And our job titles often articulate either what we do or how we feel about what we do. So I thought I'd show you a few job titles and try to see if you can pick out what the actual job is. A liquid artisan and catalytic dissemination officer. A barista, right? I know, right? I can't even put that on a business card, can you? How about a transparent wall maintenance engineer? A window washer, right? I heard it out there, right? How about this one? A celebrity. It's the actual job title of some people in retail sales. Okay? How about this one? This is my favorite. Quality and deliverance officer. Amazon. Postman. How about an obstetrician? Right? Come on. Okay, last one. This is a throw out. Chief Heart Officer. This is what they're actually called in some companies. Human Resource Manager. All right? Work is important. When you are in the right job, doing the right thing, and you feel like how you've been created is in a place where you get to express that, it just brings joy into your life. And that's what we've been talking about. So we started talking about God's design for work, that you've been created from the very beginning of our story in the Bible. Humans have been created to work. It's how God designed us. It was their destiny when they were first brought into being, and it's been God's desire for us going throughout time. We talked about how that's been disrupted. There was kind of a hostile takeover that was unsuccessful. And then from there, we talked a little bit about what to do if I think I hate my job. Last week, Kurt did a great job on how to balance work and life. This week, we want to talk about how to make an impact through your work. Have you ever considered the idea that you can make an impact for Christ because of your job? That you can make an impact at your work, you can make an impact through your work, you can make an impact because of your work. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Every single person has an opportunity. We call it missional impact, the mission of Christ. To love people and to make disciples is possible for every single person who works if they have the mindset to look for opportunities to do that. So Jesus, I'm praying this morning that you give me a focused mind, that you would take over, that my words would be your words, and that the breath of my mouth would be your breath. That you would speak to people in a way, Father, that is impactful into their lives. So people would walk away seeing their work differently, Jesus, and engage in it differently, that they might really seek to lift up your name and to help people come to know Christ through their work. I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. So let's talk about how to make an impact at your work. This was a letter that Paul wrote to a church in an ancient city called Thessalonica. This was a city that had a hostile relationship with Christianity. When you read our history, the book is called Acts. It comes after the 4 stories of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, then Acts. What you see is that the Apostle Paul, there were riots about Christianity in the ancient city of Thessalonica. So Paul's writing to the Christians there, giving them some coaching advice about how to live out their faith. And towards the end of that letter, he writes this: make it your goal. Now that word is a little understated in English. When you read it in the original languages, because we talk about how the Bible was originally written in English. This was written in a form of ancient Greek called Koine Greek. It was a street language. The make it your goal is be ambitious to achieve this. This just isn't a goal like in the beginning of the year, you make a goal to lose weight, to exercise more, and you're kind of half-hearted about it. This is something that you would put energy into achieving. Maybe it is a career goal. I want to achieve this level of position and influence, and then you just put all your time and your money and your resource into achieving that goal. That's what Paul is saying. I want you to be really ambitious, to live a quiet life, to mind your own business, to work with your hands, just as we instructed you before. Think of those three characteristics. I want you to just live a quiet life. They were living in a world that was hostile to Christianity, so Paul was like, don't go out there poking the bear, right? I want you to live a quiet life so when you come in, you're able to just engage in your business. And mind your own business at work. Don't get involved in what's going on around it. And work with your hands. Be productive, just as we instructed you. Then, this is the result. So all the time we talk about the little words or the big words in the Bible. And then is a big word because it talks about the result. If you do this, then this will be the result. If you live a quiet life, if you mind your business, and if you work with your hands, then people who are not believers, because they lived in a place where Christianity was not a dominant religion, people who are not believers will respect the way you live and you will not need to depend on others. You know what he's saying? He's like, if you do this, people who aren't Christians are going to look at you with respect. Because what's Paul's underlying narrative in this? If they're looking at you with respect, they're more likely to talk with you about what you believe. They're going to come to you with the why question. You know, you're really good at your job. People trust you. You work really hard. Why are you so different from everyone else in this workplace? What makes you stand out? And then you won't need to depend on others because you'll keep your job. Right? You'll keep your job. So think about what he's saying in this little passage from this one letter. Think of what Paul's saying about making an impact at your work. He's saying, first of all, if you can work, work. If you can work, work. Retirement is not a concept that has come out of our Bible. That's a society goal. It's not a biblical goal. So the idea is that throughout your life, be productive. Doesn't mean you need to work and have a job to the end of your life. It just means if you do retire, now you have a wealth of resource called time that you can contribute to nonprofits and to churches and invest, whether it's bringing your skill to the table or whether it's doing a job that's important there, because you can bring free work to nonprofits and churches that have beleaguered budgets. You can contribute that skill. And you can help grow it. And if you're not of retirement age and you don't have a job, I think what he's saying here is work as hard at getting a job as you would if you had a job. Work as hard at getting a job as you would at your job. Because he wants you to be independent and self-sufficient in bringing in income into your household. He goes on, and I think he really means if you are working, guard your outside life. There is no such thing anymore as a private life and a public life. You have a public life. Your public life is in every text you send. It's in every Facebook post you put up, every Instagram post that you put out, every Twitter comment that you make. Your life outside your work filters into your work. Because people make connection. You forget who's on your friend list. You forget who's able to see that post, who's able to see what's been put out there. This is why when people are hiring for jobs, what do? They search every candidate according to their social media profiles. Because they understand that what you are doing outside the work, you're going to bring into the work. And they want to have a wall. They want to know that the person who's coming in is going to be the same person, but a good employee. So guard what you post or what others post about you, because what you post is available to your employers. And if you're working, don't treat your job as if you're on Survivor. Some of us go to work and what do? We gossip, we slander, we create alliances, we undermine trust, right? We're trying to scheme and devise our way to survive at the workplace. And we're going to tear down whoever we have to, and we're going to push through whoever we have to, and we're going to burn whatever relationships we have to in order to succeed. Do you trust those people? Do you want to work with those individuals? When they get promoted, how do you feel about that? You should be walking into the workplace trying to help everyone succeed. Because when the tide rises, all boats rise with it. And what that metaphor means is that as the culture and impact of work increases, everyone should rise with it. And if you're working, be respected for your work ethic. Other people should look at you as somebody who works hard, that they can rely on, that they could go to for help, that you're going to be a productive individual that really has the best interests of everyone in mind, not just your own. Does this always mean you'll succeed? No. Because there's injustice in the world. You can live a quiet life, you can mind your own business, you could work really hard, and you could get fired. And that's unjust. These are general principles of life that work their way out in the business world. Let me give you one example. 2 weeks ago, Toby Garrity came up to me and said, Mike, I was at this national sales and training event, and the CEO of our company, Tyler Binney, they had sold their company to Boston Scientific, and he said, Tyler's outgoing message, they gave him the microphone, which is a sign of trust. Right? If you're the CEO who's going out and they say you can talk to everybody, it means there's something that they trust about this guy. So Toby sent me the speech, and I'm listening to him like, wow, this guy's really kind. He really encourages the people around him. He is a champion for his successor. He believes in his product because it's changing the welfare of human beings who are suffering with pain. This is an admirable guy. And then towards the end of his message, he said one last thing. He goes, you know that I'm a man of faith. He says, and if I have done anything good, I'm sorry, I misprinted that. If I have done anything bad, that was Tyler Binney. If there is anything good I have done, it's because God led me to do it. And he went on to talk about the impact of his faith on his work, and not just on his work, but through him into his company. So Toby reached out to Tyler and asked if I could talk about him in the message. And they had an email exchange. And this is what Tyler wrote to Toby. Just over 20 years ago, it became clear to me that my mission field is in the workplace. Reading through the book of James back in 2002, I was strongly convicted with verses from chapter 4, verses 13 to 15. This was when I learned that my vocation, ministry, and purpose can all be one and the same. It's my life passion. He's not a pastor. He doesn't work in a nonprofit. He's not a missionary or an outreach partner. This is a CEO of a company who was inspired and convicted by a passage he read in a letter in our Bible by Jesus' brother. And in case you're wondering what it was, this was the inspirational passage that changed the direction of his life and his relationship to work. Look here, you who say, today or tomorrow, we're going to a certain town and we'll stay there a year. We'll do business there and make a profit. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like a morning fog. It's here for a little while, then it's gone. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. This was his inspiration of how to make an impact at his work. And it became a guiding principle for him in his operations in his company. How do you think about your impact at work? Remember what Paul said, quiet life, mind your own business, and work real hard. Keep the right perspective. There is a time, however, when you should be a disruptor. This is from the songs or the prayers that are in the center of our Bible, ancient prayers. Give justice to the poor and the orphan, uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute, rescue the poor and the helpless, deliver them from the grasp of evil people. As Christians, we have been given commission to help those who can't help themselves, to provide for those who are unable to provide for themselves, to think of the distribution of wealth around the world and how our companies and our businesses impact that. And for places in the world in which our businesses reach, to ask the question, how can we improve that community? How can we reach even the least of these? How can we come alongside and help people who are struggling in their communities to reach a better place of life? This is like Dolores Huerta. Dolores was a school teacher in the 1950s. Now, Dolores began to see kids come into her class. They were barefoot, ragged clothes, and they were not well fed. She found out that they were the children of migrant farm workers. And so she got interested in their lives, and began to get involved in their lives outside the schoolroom. She realized their needs were profound for the whole family, not just for the children, so she got involved in community service, providing food, providing clothing, helping with legal aid, just coming alongside these kids and their families. And it had to get a little bit deeper because she realized she was helping them, but really she was like sticking a finger in a dike, and it was just another leak that would pop out. So Dolores joined together with other people and became a co-founder of United Farm Worker, the largest union for farm workers in the United States. And it was a union to help improve the work conditions of people coming into farms so they could be lifted up a little bit and have to suffer less for what they were doing. She's a school teacher who was inspired by what she experienced at work and followed God because Dolores is a woman of deep Catholic convictions. Part of her plan and her approach to solving the problem was to fast, pray, and generate peaceful protest and getting the truth out. And this is one of her quotes. When you have a voice, you have to speak up for those who don't. That's what I learned from my faith. Making an impact at your work. You can also make an impact through your work, right? So I'm going to take you through a little history of our church and with a husband-wife team that don't often get talked about in a church context. The book of Acts is the 5th book in our New Testament, right? Our Bible is broken up into a number of books. It's really a collection, an anthology. In the first book right after the 4 Gospels, the story of Jesus, is called the Acts of the Apostle. It's really the history of the first couple of decades of the church. And the most of the book of Acts is looked through the life and ministry of the Apostle Paul, recorded by a historian that was close to Paul. So Luke, the historian, writes this account. Paul left Athens and went to Corinth, and there became acquainted with a Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome. Paul lived and worked with them, for they were tent makers, just as he was. Each Sabbath found Paul at their synagogue trying to convince the Jews and Greeks alike. So the point to this is that Priscilla and Aquila had a business. They were not paid to do ministry. They ran a profession of creating tents. Paul, if you understand his life, Paul tried to live his life as what we call a bivocational pastor. So bivocational means that you work full-time outside of ministry in order to support your ability to do ministry. That was Paul's call. Paul happened to be a tent maker. When he met Priscilla and Aquila, at least from this one paragraph, it seems that he led them to faith in Christ, and they opened up their business in order to help Paul gain income to do ministry, which meant they gave up clientele and income as a means of supporting Paul. They opened up their business. They used their resources to support a person in ministry who was doing a good work for God. They were making an impact through their work. Later on in this story, Paul stayed in Corinth for some time after that. Then he said goodbye to the brothers and sisters and went to nearby Crenshaw. There, he shaved his head according to the Jewish custom, marking the end of a vow. And then he set sail for Syria. Look at it, taking Priscilla and Aquila with him. How could they go? They had made enough income in their business that they could subsidize themselves doing work with the Apostle Paul. They took their income that had been generated from their work and they used it to go on a mission trip. A mission trip is when we take time away from our work to go do good somewhere else in the name of Jesus. We have people who do this every summer when the teens go off on a summer missions trip. We have adults who take their vacation time to go with student ministries to help run the experience so that the teens can have an experience of God and they could do work in the name of Christ in that community. We also have people who do things like people in the medical profession who go and they put their medical skills at work in areas of the world where there is little access to quality medical care. There are teachers who go to do training for teachers in areas of the world where teachers don't have access to that. And there are people, when all the times that we've been to Madagascar to train pastors, we took men and women out of the business world who subsidized their own trips so that they could go and train pastors. We call it mission trips. And Priscilla and Aquila were able to do that because of their work. They used their funds in this manner. And now here's a third thing that happened out of their life. This is so they supported Paul by opening up their business. They subsidized their own work in doing Christian mission. But then meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, an eloquent speaker who knew the scriptures well, had arrived in Ephesus from Alexandria in Egypt, and he had been taught the way of the Lord. He taught others about Jesus with an enthusiastic spirit. I love that descriptor. And with accuracy. However, he knew only about John's baptism. So when Priscilla and Aquila heard him preaching boldly in the synagogue, they took him aside and explained the way of God to him even more accurately. The name Apollos pops up in the story of the church. We know hardly anything about him, but we know that he was a fantastic speaker, taught well from Scripture, but when he was off track, it was a business couple that took him aside and invested in him to help clarify what he was teaching in order to improve it. And watch what happens. Apollos had been thinking about going to Achaia, and his brothers and sisters in Ephesus encouraged him to go. That would have been including Aquila and Priscilla. They wrote to the believers there, asking them to welcome him. And when he arrived there, he proved to be of great benefit to those who, by God's grace, had believed. That's the impact of Priscilla and Aquila. Because they invested in this gentleman who was a good speaker, and they helped pull out where his theology was a little bit off. They improved what he had to say, and so his impact for Christ in that region of the world increased. Because they were business people with faith, making an impact through their work. This is my story. For the first 12 years, I worked as the student ministries pastor at Faith Community Church. I was 27 years old. I just had a brand new baby. I had never raised a teenager, and I was called to help bring other teenagers to faith in Christ and help them grow. I wasn't looking at it from the perspective of a parent. I was looking at it from a 27-year-old dope, right? I mean, when I look back at who I was at 27, it was like the grace of God that I made it through those 12 years, okay? But what I had available to me were fabulous men and women who came alongside me in the ministry, student ministry, and into my life, where people became friends to us and friends to my children, and they invested into me, into Sheila, into our family. I had homemakers. I had people who were fundraisers, musicians, filmmakers, retail managers, first responders, carpenters, educators, people in the medical industry, business people, therapists, and entrepreneurs. They invested into me. They helped me to raise up a solid ministry. They helped me to create opportunities to educate teens better. They went on mission trip with me, and they brought their professional skills to the task. We built houses. We renovated places. We did tremendous work. There were nurses who came in order to take care of the teens through the whole thing. They were supportive. They invested in my growing theology and my ministry practices. And when I transitioned to become lead pastor, there were people there who had executive skills who helped me understand financing and business operations, goals, and vision, and how to train people. These were individuals, most of whom had no biblical training whatsoever. But they gave their time and their resource to ministry, and they invested into a young pastor, and you, I hope you are the benefit of that. Right? You are significant in the impact you can have through your work. With the skills you've gained, the experience that you've acquired, and the wisdom that you've been given. You can also make an impact because of your work. Let's go back to that church in Thessalonica, because Paul, in a second book, in a second letter to the church, he wrote this. For you know that you ought to imitate us. We were not idle when we were with you. We never accepted food from anyone without paying for it. We worked hard day and night so that we would not be a burden to any of you. We certainly had the right to ask you to feed us, but we wanted to give you an example to follow. In other words, this is what he said before. He was working hard. He lived a quiet life, minded his own business, and was productive. He wanted to be an example to others. He said, so even while we were with you, we gave you this command. Those who are unwilling to work will not get to eat. Paul wanted us to understand that work is a gift. It's a blessing. It's how we provide shelter for ourselves and our family. It's how we put food on the table. It's how we pay our utility bills so that we're warm in the winter and we're cool in the summers. Right? It's how we provide medical care for ourselves. It's how we invest into the education of our children. God has given you the ability to work that you might bring income into your family, that you could meet your needs. Work is a gift. It's not meant to be a burden. We don't just work. That's why we call this series. We don't work by default, like I got to work. We work by design. I get to work. And when you put a meal on your table, thank God for your job. When you walk into your house, thank the Lord for the home that you've been given. When you drive to work, thank God for the car that you have. When your kids go off to school, thank God for an empty house. Thank God that you're able to pay for their education, right? I'm just saying, switch your perspective. You don't have to work. You get to work. And if you don't think that's a value, talk to somebody who's been fired who really wants to work. In another letter he wrote to a different group of people, to talk as he's talking about making an impact. Anyone who has been stealing, this is an interesting verse because this has a twist in it. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer. So he's like, get an honest job, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands. Why? That they may have something to share with those in need. That was a twist. Every time I read that, it catches my attention. Get an honest job, work hard, be generous. Your job empowers you to be generous, which is a gift to the world. You've heard me say this often. Let's just walk through it again. If you got quality food, if you walk into your house and you can eat, if you turn on the tap and you got clean water, if you can get access to quality medical care, if you have a job, if you live in a safe home where there's no fear, if you have access to education, if you have a change of clothes in your closet, if you have a reliable car to drive, if you have some savings put away in the bank, and you have the freedom to choose your job and how you work, you rank in the top 5% of the world's wealthiest people. If you only can say yes to 5 of those things, you rank in the top 20% of the world's wealthiest people. This room is filled from a global perspective with some of the wealthiest people in the world. Not because of how much you make, but because of what you have access to. And there's this idea, freely you have received, freely give. From our generosity comes the impetus to be generous to others. You can imitate Christ by being generous to others as God has been generous to you. We've had opportunities throughout the years to work with organizations like World Vision, where we sponsored a whole community, a village, as you would a child. But then I think it was over 400 kids were sponsored by people of our church. Do you know that by sponsoring one child, they get food, medical attention, clothes, and an education? And on a monthly basis, it costs less than it does for you to go out to eat once in that month. Just a small means of making a difference. Because if we do an honest job and we can live a productive life, we can choose to be generous to others. We can choose. There are people in our church who give 5 figures a year to the church. There are people in our church who give 6 figures a year. And I was stunned at the moment that someone gave 7 figures to the church from the generosity of their work. And I know individuals who've given 3 figures in the course of a year, and it was a precious, sacrificial donation to the church. It's not the size of the gift, it's the sacrifice and the spirit of generosity that makes it a joy to God. You're able to do so much. We once had she was a wonderful elderly woman. She attended a group we had for seniors. She was single her whole life. She was a good spirit. She lived a simple life. And when she died, she gave all the proceeds to the church, which included her house. And in her house, there were piles of magazines everywhere. And so somebody went through to clean out the house. They realized there was money stuffed into the magazines. So we had people at our church went through every single magazine, every single book, because she saved them all, right? By the time that we were done and we had sold the house, she'd given almost $1 million to the church. And then on the other end of that, I remember a woman who met me after church, and she sat right over there, and she said, "Mike, I want to give a gift to the church," and she put a ring in my hand. And I'm like, "I'm already married," and she's just, and she said, "This was an engagement ring from my abusive husband, and I've just broken free of that marriage and the abuse, and I want to give this to the Lord as a sign of a second start." We had to figure out what to do with it, right? It was just a generous gift that inspired our church. Every single thing we do is because people are generous to give from their work. We turn on the lights. That costs money. We heat or cool a facility. It costs money. We got a campus that we're renting in Framingham. It costs money. We put up new technology. It costs money. We have staff. It costs money. We have curriculum we buy. We have resources for children we buy. We send teens off to retreats and to mission trips. All these things cost. Yes, right? We've taken people on tours of the building. You know what they say? "Wow, what type of trust fund do you have to pay for this?" 0. All our bills right now are being paid by the giving of people. We have money in reserve, like wise people, for contingency situations. Things that we've also put aside from big unexpected maintenance on the building. This is just wise finance. You support people around the world doing work for Christ in places around the world. Because you give, we're able to support someone who brings Bible studies and Christian care into juvenile lockups. Because you give, we have somebody who helps orchestrate a global conference for Urbana that inspires young men and women to go off into mission. Because you give, there are people investing into colleges to help the next generation come to know Christ in order to live. We have people that you have supported that have translated the Bible into a new language for the first time. The first written thing in their language was a Bible. Because you give. That's how you make an impact through your work. You make an impact at your work, through your work, because of your work. So stop for a second. Take a deep breath with me. Clear your mind. Focus on the screen. What about you? How can you make a difference at your work? Can you be the voice of Christ to people? Can you pray for those around you? You know, there was one year that the teacher of the year said that they would walk up and down the aisles of their classroom praying for every student that would sit in one of those seats. If you're a first responder and somebody comes in a crisis situation, why can't you pray for them? Right? If you're sitting in the cafeteria and a conversation comes up, why can't you bring some of your faith and values into the conversation? If you're worried about the justice of your business and what it's doing outside or in communities or inside and the way that people are being treated, maybe it's time to express your voice. What about through your work? Is God inspiring you? Why can't you, if you're a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician, why can't you make partnerships with nonprofits like SMOC, the Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council, that has homes for people transitioning out of homelessness into residential care where you could do free work for them, electrical, plumbing, or carpentry? Why not? Why can't you contribute your IT skills to churches, to your church and to your businesses to help people who don't have the money to pay for that? What about because of your work? It's tax time. When you do your taxes this year and you look at your charitable giving, how generous are you? What is God saying to you this morning? Lord, I thank you. I thank you for my job. You have blessed me, Father. Not just me, but for everyone sitting in this room who works. You have blessed them. Now open our eyes. Show us, Father, what we can do at our jobs. So is what we can do through our work. Speak to us about what you want us to do because of our work. Love you, Father. Amen.